free. So.
Meetings of March 5th, 2025. First up, under committee of the whole, we asked in January to have the law director, because we're in our obligation every 10 years to do a charter review, to come out with an outline of what we had to do and get it done before our selections go to the ballot in the fall ballot. So Hope, are we going to turn this over to you?
Sure. Before you are a copy of the Kent City Charter, and also I put in front of you a tentative schedule that hopefully, if council can get the commission members in place by April 1st, we would start meetings in April every 2 weeks up into June. We certainly will add more dates if we need to, if we start getting bogged down. I'd like to get the recommendations back to council in July so that you can discuss them yourselves and take some time to decide which ones you would like to send to the Board of Elections for the voters to vote on, which would be sometime in September. It's typically 60 days before the general election. And at this time, we've posted the ad for members online. We've also, Kathy says that Patty also posted something on the website requesting citizens to, take a look at the charter. If you have any amendments, we'd like to see those, or proposals. I will do the same with city department heads to see if there's any items out there. I personally have a couple myself, so.
Hope, I got one question. I know we have to do this every 10 years, and it's supposed to be a 15-member panel. Is there any, I think, Myself, I think 15 people is just too much to have on hand.
Mayor, that's going to be one of my, proposed amendments.
Oh, I didn't mean to take that away from you.
That's okay, we can co-sponsor it.
It just seems like there's a huge amount of people to work with.
You know, it is, especially with people's schedules, and you got to get the quorum, and then, I agree. I think that possibly 9, 7 to 9 might be a...
As long as you have an odd
sweet-
number.
Yeah, the sweet spot there, yeah.
Are there questions? Roger?
Do you want us to email you our names of people, or do you want to?
There is a application out there that we would like them to fill
I
out.
saw that, so we
Um,
just direct,
Yeah, Kathy,
just direct them, Kathy, to that application process.
yes,
Right.
yeah.
And they can return it to me or to you or however they want to. If I get any, I'll send them on to you.
Well, that does sort of, if I could jump in, Mr. Mayor, we sort of need to decide procedurally, okay, you're going to start collecting names. And I think the mayor said this, but for the newbies, so to speak, we'll review it. I mean, honestly, I've been here 20 years, and this is only the second time, because they did it in 2015. You had already started it by the time I was hired in June of 2005, so I was kind of late to that party. But, so I've only done it once, too. But the way the mayor reminded you and reminded me is each council member came up with 2 names, and Hope asked, well, what was the procedure? And I said, actually, the mayor said they stuck them in a hat, and they drew them out. And so Heidi remembers that. I do. But you can decide how you want to handle. I just want to say that's how it was done in the past. Right now, if you notice on Hope's schedule, she didn't schedule anything at the April committee meeting. So if you feel like you need time to talk about the candidates by then, or whatever else procedurally you want to do, that gives you some latitude to work that in the first week of April. So keep that in mind. I'm sorry, Robin, I saw you had.
Yeah, Robin?
Mayor. Actually, I've been on everyone since 1990. So that's a little while. What they would do is every council person would have one appointment which would be
Okay.
on the board, and the other acts as an alternate, which would be picked out of the hat to see exactly to fill out. So there would be nine choices which the council would appoint. The other ones that they would bring to the table would then be the ones that were picked by chance out of a lot. And then they would fill out whatever the amount, which I don't know, what was it, 10 or 15?
Supposed to be 15, but I think that's too large.
Okay, well, but I'm just saying the process that they used was that the council people would appoint one that would definitely be a part of the commission. The others would be chosen as alternates. So if they want to reduce that down, that would of course knock out the council people having at least one choice which would be on there. Leave it more to chance. But that was the process before.
What year was that?
Oh, right, that started in 1990. I was on the ones from 1990 up to...
That's right.
I think I've missed one since 1990.
Yeah, I don't remember that process, but I was here. I came on in '85.
Oh, well, yours is a little ahead of
Right.
when I got there, but that's the process they used when I was coming on.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's a very good strategy.
Melissa, you have something?
Oh, I was just going to say, that sounds like a good strategy,
Yeah.
that each of us choose someone and then throw other names in for choice.
Okay. Heidi?
Yeah, couple months ago, I remember this came up. So I have been actively recruiting. And so, because I know there's 15 people, that's an awful lot to fill. So I would say, let's see how many people register, sign up, and then we can talk about it at our April committee meeting, how we're going to narrow it down if we have to. But 15 people, I mean, yes, please, everybody recruit, you know, get people to be interested in it. If they actually end up filling out an application, then we have names. And if we have to figure out a way to, like I said, narrow it down, then we can go from there, because the charter says we have to have 15 people. And that could be something that they propose, we change, you know, the voters change, because that is an awful lot of people. You know, we have trouble sometimes filling our boards and commissions, so I don't really want to say everybody gets one person right now, because I don't even know if the people that I've talked to are going to come through and actually fill out an application. But it's good to talk to people.
Gwen?
Yeah, I just have a couple of quick questions. So council members can't be on charter. What about people on boards or commissions? So it has to be somebody who is not serving on a board or commission or any other capacity?
Correct, and they must be a voter.
Okay.
In
So,
the real city, you can't.
okay, yeah. All right, so Kent voter, obviously no employees.
Correct.
Okay, no board, no commission, no council person?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
all right. That leaves about 25 people left in the city. Yeah, I'm kidding.
We
Robin?
only need 15.
Is that correct? I thought they had to be an elector.
That's what I said.
Voter.
Voter's not an elector.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't. I had that argument. A voter, an elector is a person who actually can vote if they would choose to. They meet the requirements of citizenship to do it. But it's not an actual, an elector is different than a voter.
No, Robin's right. It says a person who has the right to vote in an election, not is
Yeah.
registered to vote.
Okay, so they have to be 18.
Yeah.
Okay, we all learned something.
Yep.
Jeff,
Thank
did you have your? Chris?
Yeah, one question, one comment. The first is the question, which is, I've had a few friends be interested. My concern is they've never been involved in this city. Boards, commissions, they may have attended Beer Fest downtown, right? But, you know, qualifications and the fact that you exclude council. I mean, the charter excludes council, the charter excludes boards and commissions. I'm worried about these people showing up and not knowing what they're doing and being influenced by the people managing the process. So I guess the question would be, what's the what's the management like? So, you know, my brother shows up. He's interested, but, you know, new to city government. So how does he participate in a way that's, you know, that frees him up, but also, you know, is
Well, it's really no different than other boards and commissions, honestly.
Okay.
I will, both Kathy and I will be at the meetings, and once a chairman is voted on, they'll take the lead, and basically I will just act as like officio if they need direction on anything. If they want any research done to see what other cities do and things like that. I've been doing this for going on 35 years, so I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to maybe say, I'd hang off, guys. This, where you're going might not be the best idea. Let's think about this. I may say things like that from time to time, but typically, gosh, I've probably been involved in about 5 charter reviews, and I find the quality of the citizens that come to the table is incredible, and they take it very seriously, and I've honestly never seen a problem at all, like with anyone that's rogue or doesn't have their heart in it.
Okay, yeah, that's great, and I think it is, I take your point around it's similar to a commission, and I, you know, fully acknowledge your authority and experience. But I also am aware that it's a little bit different from a board in that we're sort of asking regular citizens to attempt to modify constitution of the city. And so I think some kind of guardrails would be really helpful.
I'll be the guardrail. I mean, they can only do it in the bounds of what the charter is. If they would come up with an idea that is it suitable for the charter, I could say, no, that's not where this goes. That might be an ordinance that you would speak to your councilman about.
And they're just making suggestions.
Yeah, and they're just making suggestions, and the true guardrail is when they come to you.
You have the final say.
Because you will ultimately vote on whether or not you believe their recommendations are good for the city or not.
Yep. And
Can I just
sure,
finish
go
a
ahead.
thought
Yeah, of course.
that popped in my head, besides the fact that you're the final say? They
Yes.
just come back a recommendation. I
Totally.
think that's important. The other is, this isn't done in secrecy. They can come talk to you, they can talk to the citizens, they can, and you can talk to them too, if they have, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
so,
it's a dynamic.
and it's pretty high-level organizational stuff that, what's the word I want to use? Like, it's almost commonsensical, a lot of it. Not to say it doesn't help to have experience in government, but I also don't think it's necessarily a prerequisite. I don't know. My experience with it has been pretty, it's a pretty, like Hope said, pretty smooth process. I think there's been a couple recommendations that I remember council saying, yeah, I don't think we're going to do that. Here's why. We appreciate what you've done, but we're not going to go that way. But even those weren't like out there stuff. You know, it was just a difference of opinion. So.
Okay. And oh, sorry, Melissa.
No,
I'm
go
not
ahead,
interrupting.
finish.
Well, Roger had his hand
Well,
up
I
there,
did have one
Melissa.
comment.
Roger?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Oh.
I did have one comment. Just
All
to
right.
finish up, which is, I know that we talked earlier, it wasn't necessarily a quota, but we talked about engaging young people in the city charter review process. And I know that there have been some advocates in the city texting me about this and reaching out to my brother, reaching out to people. So, I mean, I would encourage there to be some, I think if we go purely by chance, which it sounds like we're not going to do that, but if we go, we miss out on the opportunity to be a bit intentional about inclusion for the various populations in the city. So that might be one intersection that I would endorse.
Roger?
Yeah, Chris, I would only offer this. In 1980, I believe it was, or 81, I was on the Charter Review Commission. I had no clue, really, when I got on the Charter Review Commission, other than being a high school social studies teacher, which is significantly different than what goes on in a city administration and whatever. I would caution you about trying to put people who come in who you or any one of us perceive that they have some kind of an agenda or they have some kind of I guess what I'm saying is I believe in the purest form of democracy. The last thing I would do is block any citizen. I mean, they'd have to be way out there that I wouldn't consider them, because isn't that what we're supposed to be? And who's to say that a 19-year-old or who's never been in government, or a 58-year-old or a 75-year-old isn't wandering out there that may have some good ideas and can engage the Charter Review Commission? Because remember, it's a commission and everyone has to vote to move things forward. So I don't want to discount anyone. I don't know that they need to have any professional training. I don't believe that they have to have any of that, Chris. I think that goes to the heart of what you believe in, to be honest with you, about pure democracy.
Sure.
And this is about as pure a form as you can get, serving on a Charter Review Commission and having, how many of us can take this charter and we know it verse and paragraph, and I would argue none of us do. Because it's worked, but there are things in there that may need to change. And one last anecdote, antecedent, in 1980, we came to City Council. We actually came with a wacky idea that we should extend the eastern boundary of Kent and the western boundary of Kent all the way down to Route 76.
Wow.
And we were laughed out of City Council. I mean, they were polite, but it was like, because we were 30-something-year-olds who said, hey, this is a good idea. Let's, because you could annex land back then. Now you can't do it. Back then, all we had to do was annex all that land to the south, and the city council basically, I'll never forget, the old police station, was the city council chambers. And we presented it, and it was hilarious, because they thought we were crazy. I don't know that anyone would have thought it was crazy today, where we
No.
would have had more land, we would have had, be able to develop, have different types of development, industrial development and everything else. So I guess what I'm saying is that I was one of those who had no clue and came up with wacky ideas, and it got stopped by city council, which was probably appropriate back then, because we had to extend sewer lines, we had to have police, we had to have fire. I mean, there are a lot of things that would go into that. But I'm okay. I'm okay if we draw it out of a hat, too. To me, I think purest form of democracy. And so that's just my thoughts, Chris. Not that yours aren't as valid as mine. I'm just saying.
No, I'll take the floor just for a second, just to say, I think this is part of my thrust to have more young people on the charter review. Just to say,
I gotta say this, Chris, you got elected to council, but you really didn't have 100% no, right?
100%.
It was a learning process.
Yeah. Well, who does? right?
Fast.
It is a learning process.
Pretty fast. Okay, Melissa?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask her, Hope or whoever, are these gonna be public meetings? Can we attend the meeting?
Yep.
Are they gonna be, are they gonna be available like through YouTube, like our youth meetings are?
We'll talk to Nick about that. I'm not sure.
I just wanna, we can't do that, okay. Whatever we can to make these as public and as open, and to have notes, I think, from the meetings that actually summarize what
Yes.
happened. That's really helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, can I also point out, a Hawkeye next to me, she noted that I had made the statement, well, there's nothing scheduled for the April committee meeting, which I think is like the 4th or something, somewhere around the 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And she said, she pointed to the sheet and says, yeah, but we're supposed to have everybody selected by the 1st. So I guess there's some fluidity to this process, but you also have, so you actually have 2 dates not on here where if you have enough names in your pocket, you could start selecting 2 weeks from tonight, and then 2 weeks from 4 weeks from, no, there's an extra week in March. So the first committee meeting, and so again, this is a tentative schedule, it's not written in stone, but that's a good catch, that we do have 2 opportunities. Should you have enough names to consider, you could probably try to, we'll keep our eye on that.
Okay, Robin?
Yeah, we have to understand this is a political process. And there are going to be some issues sometimes. People coming on, a lot of us, quite frankly, being elected officials and politicians, are going to be appointing people that may have a certain dynamic view about some things political. Might be even the reason that we choose them. Believe me, that happens quite a bit. I've been on a number of the charter review commissions, and that's often happened. People come on with some agenda, such as life and what we're doing and the appointment process. Most of this stuff, though, is still required. Public meetings, the public meetings law requires to every meeting that the charter review has. Any notes that are taken are just like with us. So it's going to be very open, I think a very dynamic process dependent on what they bring forward. But it's not going to be overly pristine. It might be nice to feel that everybody's coming on with, kind of altruistic vision about everything, but it is to them. So that's what we accept and we move on. That still has to come before council before it's passed on. It has to come before, I think it has to have 2/3 vote in order to move forward, whatever they come up with. I've always thought it actually should be the other way, but that's the way it is in this. And with Chris, I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. What Roger said is accurate. Pretty much you go through a process. It's kind of distilled. Got to come before a council, then it would have to go before the voters and all those things for any changes. So it's an excellent opportunity for us to allow for this process to move forward. I think it's out of the democratic principles of our society, this fits very well into it. And I'm hoping we'll get the opportunity to make an appointment my first time. That's going to be kind of nice. So I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? So, Hope, question, we have to have our process of picking people before the 1st of April?
No, honestly, you could, because the tentative first meeting doesn't start until the 15th.
Yeah, they have to be in place by April 1st.
That was just tentative, no.
All right,
This is
okay.
very fluid.
All right, so I guess where we're at, the applications are there. Get some off, if you need to pass them out personally, get them off Kathy, and they're on the website. Is there any other discussion on this?
How many applications do we have right now?
I think I've received 3.
Only 3, okay.
And I know that you have the first one that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has received any or any interest.
All right, let's go on it. All right, next on the agenda is the 2025 Administration Strategic Plan. We get this yearly, and it's a good document that the city manager puts out. It tells us where we came from, where we are, and where we're going. Mr. Rohr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a packet that you get actually every year. How much we talk about it kind of depends just on how things are going and whether we need to talk about it. It's always, again, just like the schedule, fluid. What's not necessarily fluid is sort of the commitment to the sort of the foundational principles, or I don't know if I'm in the constitutional mood or something, but the things that our community identified back in pretty much every planning effort, and believe it or not, there's quite a few of them. The most recent would be the Bicentennial Plan, which, just for refresher, won a national award for outstanding level of community engagement. So that was back in 2005. But those pillars, actually you'll see those same themes of safe city, financially stable city, community of neighborhoods and diversity, and it's in here. And that's what's, everything we do is sort of organized around those things. So I know sometimes on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis, you come in here and we throw a bunch of stuff at you, ask you to approve it and change this, change that. And I'm not sure you see the patterns. It's like being too close to a Monet, right? Like you're like this, and you don't really see the patterns. There is patterns, and I can prove it. That's what this does every year. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I had a chance. Actually, we drilled this down to the level even when I was working with Dom on her sort of her work plan for the year. I'm like, well, we want to organize your work around the areas that are in our strategic plan, our strategic targets, and because those don't change, but the work activities in terms of what projects maybe this year or next year may change, but it's still to advance those 4, 5, 6 categories. So this, I guess, is when I nerd out a little bit, and my government nerd comes out, and you'll see a whole lot of data here. I was in grad school when reinventing government was the phrase, and I worked with a business school professor, and he was like having me do all this research on how governments can be more data-driven, and that which gets measured gets improved. And I think we still see some of that, and but it is deeply rooted in me, and maybe to a detriment at times, but I actually don't force everybody else to engage with me in that level. But I do enjoy, I track all the things that we do, and I never know where to start with this. So the foundational principles, again, taken from all those, a stack of community plans. The other one, probably the most, I think this, I got to dig this one out because it was Vision 2020. Well, that was done in like 1990. So it's kind of like, are they going to have floating cars in 2020? You know, I need to go back and see. I can guarantee you when I read it the first time, though, those same principles, vibrant downtown, neighborhoods, those kind of things. And that's what, I guess we would start with sort of the goals and objectives. Those goals and objectives, they're not Dave's, and they're councils, but actually they're the communities, right? Because these came straight out of those documents. I sort of distilled the themes that the residents consistently talked about. And honestly, 90% of them are the same you'll see in almost every community. Everybody wants a safe community. Everybody wants certain fundamental preservation of certain things. And now, that being said, I did actually, so some of the objectives in this little handbook, I will tweak them a little bit to try to reflect something that maybe I hadn't seen pop up before. And the example this year, in one of the categories, communities within the city, I added, provide a service safety net for homeless in the community. Because that was something that I heard, and I didn't want to lose that, right? I want to keep that somewhere. So that's in here now. And that's the kind of stuff, I think a couple years ago, back when Melissa Long, right, was on council, she talked a lot about senior citizens, and I know we added some stuff about senior citizens in there, just a couple bullet points. Again, that's not a huge deal, but what the basis, this then becomes translated into services and projects that we try to advance those causes. For those that like to say, how did we do last year as a council, the strategy performance update is sort of my data. That's the first fold out in the center of this. You know, I just look at things, how much time you spend in council, how many ordinances did you pass, how many ordinances do you pass per hour kind of thing. You know, you just try to see, not that you're judged by that, but it's a good indicator of how we're spending our time, where are we spending our time. Sometimes it's easy to get swept up in certain topics and you think all we ever do is planning and community development because Bridget's always at the microphone. Well, actually she is a common denominator, but she's not maybe the leading category. It's always near the top. Not always. The last couple of years it's been near the top, but we are a full service city. And back when we were doing the downtown, I know there were certain people that would suggest all the city cares about is the downtown. They don't care about neighborhoods. Well, actually, we do care about neighborhoods. We did a lot of neighborhood work. We adopted, the inspections and the maintenance standards, and we hired staff for neighborhoods. Maybe those things didn't make the news, but we keep track of that so that we say, are we maintaining balance across our categories, our key categories? And I'm proud to say we are. We continue to do that. I'm not going to go through this page by page, but you can get a flavor for where we're spending our time, the ups and downs. I tend to like the last page of that the first report, because you actually see sort of eras in terms of council and the staff, excuse me, where we spend our time. I'm catching Hope's frog. So back in 2008, so I started this, I arrived in mid-2005. I didn't think to start this until 2008. So that's when I started it. So we're at almost 20 years, not quite, of this data, which is kind of interesting. But anyways, back in 2008 to 2010, it was all about Rhonda Hall and finances and budget because we were in the Great Recession. And then 2011 to 2016, it would be Eric, and it wasn't Eric at the time, it would have been Dan Smith, and but all the downtown revitalization work, redevelopment work. And then 2017-18, we started to really ramp back up in some of our community services, and that's where you saw the rental inspections. And, Bridget, we always talked about, and she likes to say, we didn't do all the downtown just to be the end point. It was to be a place that people want to call home, and that's an amenity. A downtown's a great amenity that we have, but neighborhoods matter, neighborhoods where people live. And so that was a big focus, 2017-18. And then, frankly, 19 through 24, COVID arrived, and that 2 or 3 years worth of done that unsettling period, and we changed things, we changed procedures. A lot of the things that you did in council were almost organizational oriented, and that's why that category has sort of predominated lately. Part of that is because organizational performance is the broadest category. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes in that. City Hall construction, and we had updates on that consistently. So the other question I frequently get is, what's coming? What's working on next? And I know even Chris kind of asked that question back when the Main Street was going to apply for the grant. He's like, well, what are the other things in the pipeline that this may be an opportunity cost, or something like that? this is where you can get a feel for that. I'm not telling you this is written in stone, but this is kind of our best projections for where we see our work and some of the stuff that we're already working on, stuff that should be coming out of the pipeline. And I did it in the subcategories: the planning and community development, economic development, financial affairs, organizational performance, environment, and quality of life. So if ever you're at a loss and you're like, I need to go have a constituent meeting and I can't remember all the things the city staff is doing, I know we're doing a lot, this is not a bad thing to pull out. And remember that you have that. Where all that data came from, those are all sort of summary data. This middle piece, the fold out. So I love this because the first left-hand side of this is what we call our community performance framework. And that's where you work your way from left to right, and you can see these are the things that we call strategic values. These are the things that the community has identified. Those are the categories. And then we sort of translate them down lower to, all right, here's some very specific objectives underneath those categories. And then each month as you're doing your agenda items, I try to go back and I plug in each agenda item and I try to match the category the best I can. It's an imperfect fit, but that's okay. We're just trying to get kind of feel for trends. And I keep track of the time. And that's why you see, like you can see at the bottom, the pie charts, how much time do we spend in organizational, how much in economic development for the first quarter, then the second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. All that gets summarized into those data charts that you saw in that first part of the report. For those that have been around a little longer, one of my favorite things to do is to open this back section, the 2008 through 24 Strategic Achievement Summary, because that, by category for each year, says here's kind of the highlights. It doesn't capture everything we did. That would be impossible. It doesn't capture the routine. I don't write, we filled 4,000 potholes that year. No, I mean, that's just routine business. We're going to do that every year. We fixed water lines. But these are kind of some of the standout items in each of the category that the staff and the council worked on. It's kind of fun, I got to say. Now, maybe I'm just being nostalgic, but to kind of look at the trajectory that we've been on and to kind of go back and just say, oh, I remember when we did that, and I remember when we did that, and I can't believe it's been 10 years already since we did this. And so I often make the case, I hope it's compelling, but I make the case that city business, our industry, we are sort of a body of work. You know, you should judge us on our body of work. And so part of, because yes, there's fancy fun stuff like the downtown, there's great projects, East Main Street, those kind of things. But still, we are busy every day in each of these categories, and it's so easy to go week to week, day to day with what's the latest crisis, I got to fix that, you got your blinders on, you're fixing that, and you lose track of how much you accomplished. This is kind of in a small way to reflect back on how much good work has been done. I think it's a point of pride. I think it's the kind of thing, when I look back, I'm like, this is really impressive. I don't think cities don't necessarily do a good job of keeping track of that. I'm not saying I'm some superhero by doing this. It's labor intensive for the data, but once you kind of get it set up, I can keep it running pretty easily, and it's great to kind of see. And honestly, you know, none of us are going to be here forever, so for the next generation of city manager, the next whatever, they will have a good basis to see what happened when and how did we create this mess that we're in now. Hopefully that's not what they're saying, but it gives you that kind of reflective capacity that you may not otherwise have. Now, that being said, I, for one, don't read the details all the time, so we came up with a one-page summary and I think we'll call it the one-page, well, it doesn't have a title, but this essentially takes those categories across the top that the community identified. The top half just gives you the conventional nerdy stuff of what are the kind of results that you hope to achieve in each of those, what it would be the measures of each of those. But at the bottom, I think, is where it gets a little more interesting, and then on the flip side, too. But the bottom is, I'm saying of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, looks like 8 categories, the top 3 for us in 2005 and 2006 are economic growth and development, environment, quality of life, and government performance. If you go back to previous years, it might have 1 or 2 different. Likewise, 3 or 4 years ago, it could be a completely different top 3. But this gives you a sense that, hey, look, this is our pulse on sort of the community from the staffing end. These are the kind of things that we think are going to be our top efforts. Our most energy is going to be devoted to these things. So you can pull those out and kind of get a quicker look. And then I think it was Heidi 2 years ago, Heidi made the statement, that's great for next year, but can you do even more further out than that? So last year we started doing sort of 2-3 year out, so 2006 and through 28, where we start just putting some things on the dashboard there that say, here's some things that I think we're going to be working on. I'm less confident because you never know what's going to happen between now and then, but I don't want you to think we sort of randomly bounce our way from crisis to crisis. I know Bridget and I have this conversation very often. I hate bouncing from crisis to crisis. What we love best is being a part of the strategic planning process and the strategic working process, because I mean, the plans are pretty well clear in terms of what expectations in the community are, generally what expectations of council are. You're welcome to change those at any time. We try to give you the framework so that if you're thinking about certain changes, you can see where it fits, and you're like, well, that makes sense. This is a good time for me to talk to staff about this project or that project that I've been thinking about, and we're certainly, you know, welcome to try to integrate that. And this is a fluid document. Honestly, I almost went back and edited it again before I handed it out tonight, because when I did this probably the end of January, early February, we didn't have the indications of potential risk of federal funding changing, and that could be a top priority for us, and that wasn't really on the radar screen until a little more recently. I'm like, well, I'm not going to go back and change all that. That would obviously have our attention. If that plays out in a negative way, it'll have our attention, and we'll jump on that. But for right now, those are the things. It's way too much. I probably talked and bored you more than you care to be bored already, but I just wanted to give you that kind of, your staff has a method to the madness, and that's tried to be captured here. We hope it resonates with you. We hope the category, all those things resonate, and we hope it can be a resource to you, and I hope it organizes your thoughts as well. So you're welcome as time, whenever, if you have input, changes, thoughts, we welcome that. That's always fine. I do try to update it, usually in January. Sometimes it kicks into February, so that's like the ideal time, but that's that. That's all I got for now.
Questions? Seeing none? Oh, Chris?
I have a question. So, first of all, amazing body of work.
Okay.
This is, it's so helpful to see it organized like this. So, thank you. And it's great to see a little report card for council.
Right.
It seems like we passed.
You passed. Okay.
So thank you. Am I right that the last strategic planning you said was 2005?
The community-wide, yes. And then what I would tell you is the, why am I forgetting the name? Dom, what was the effort that we were working on where you talk to residents, you film residents, what do you love about your community, what do you want to change? Remember Harrison was working on it?
Heart and soul.
What is it?
Heart and soul.
Heart and Soul. That was going to be the next version of that.
Okay.
And it did get a little derailed by COVID, but I'll also tell you, boy, we put a lot of effort to generate interest. And there was a good dozen people that were quite interested, and then nobody else. And so we kind of took that as a message and said, you know, I'm not sure the categories are going to change, right? Like financial health, yeah, I still, now, that's why this was almost like a higher level. What do you love about your community? And maybe a way of coming at it with a less planning focus and more of a living focus. That's what we really loved about that template. It's a national template. Unfortunately, it didn't get there was no sticking, and we decided you can't force a community engagement process. Mm-hmm. So if it wants to recycle itself, I know the national organization that worked with us on that, they were disappointed. They actually gave us some funding early on, and we used that grant funding. But they said this can happen. Some places either have enough already that people feel good about where it is, or for whatever reason, it can be a dozen reasons, it doesn't always take off. So that's the answer to that question, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. My only comment is I know we're going to have 3 new council members this time next year. And to your excellent point around trying not to react crisis to crisis, but more being in planning mode is, you know, the organization I work for, we have a strategic planning process every few years. So yeah, I guess my question was, is there an upcoming process, or if that's more of an ad hoc process to propose? If again, you know, with you and Dom's help, we identify that there is that interest from the community again to revive such an idea.
Yeah, so there's kind of two thoughts that run through my head when you ask that question. There's the one in terms of, does council just want to spend time going through this kind of stuff
Yeah.
in I don't want to say internal, because it's certainly open to the public, I don't mean it like that, but not we're going to go have 30 community meetings, but just something where you are kind of listening to us talk about where our priorities from the staff level are. So look, it's a little bit of a challenge, or yes, you give us direction, but we're also supposed to be the experts.
Totally.
And so it's kind of this weird, and honestly, early in my career, we had a couple of these, and it was like crickets. Council was just kind of sat and listened, and okay, and they didn't say much. And we actually brought in a nationally recognized former city manager who went around the country facilitating strategic planning sessions with councils. And he said, afterwards, he was great, because he said, you must be doing something right, because there was no comment at this meeting, and I've never seen that. Now this was like 2010, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we decided, you know what? I'm not going to force strategic planning on council either. If they're happy with kind of the general framework, they're happy with the items, they're happy with the performance, there's no shame in being happy with what you got, because there's a ton of work that's gone into this. Like it's not dismissive. You're not doing your duty.
Absolutely.
But that being said, I know Heidi at different times, she's been like, I'm chomping at the bit to get a little more engaged in something. I don't think you should feel compelled to wait for a full-blown process to do that. That's why we've tried to get you in touch with Eric. And I think there are plenty of opportunities to do sort of mini engagement with us. And we can also do more formalized engagement with us and just dedicate half a committee night one night, you know, and just talk about this stuff in more detail and see where your thoughts are at, or the new council. So point taken. I'm not as... It is an enormous effort for a relatively small staff to do a full-blown community engagement process, as we learned even from the Heart and Soul. How am I blanking on that? Sorry. I loved it, and I can't remember the name. It was exhausting, and so I'm not going to force that, but I would love to see a group come back and want to do that. I think that is really the fine-tuning of this sense of community that is much more meaningful than strategic planning. That's so dry. I think this livability issue and what are the things that matter in your community, coming at it. Roger used the phrase, he loved to talk about this early on, Roger.
Appreciative inquiry.
Appreciative inquiry, thank you. Sorry, guys, I'm tired. Anyways.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Melissa?
I'm curious, because we really don't have data points from the greater community since 2005. Am I hearing you correctly?
In terms of...
Like a survey?
In terms of
or kind
surveys.
of a community survey?
We did surveys in the 2008-9 era. But no, since then, not really.
Yeah, and because I participated in the first 5 sessions of Heart and Soul, and
Okay.
I found it an interesting process. It was a really big time commitment, and it was, I've done a lot of strategic planning, and I think there's value to get those data points from the community back into the discussion for us. I remember there were some things we talked about in 2024, and even Bridget, some of the work that she's been doing, still doing that, the 2005 touch point about what the community wanted. That's 20 years ago, and a lot has changed. The world has changed so monumentally in so many ways. and there's a lot of really great technology out there that we could make use of so that it's not an expensive process, so that we can take a longer period of time, get engagement through Main Street Kent in a lot of different ways. I'd really like to see us get some data from the community in a very kind of straightforward way so that we bring that into this process. I think, just as Chris said, as a strategic planner myself, this is, you know, I'm nerded out on over all this data points, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that lots has changed, and we should make that touch point back with the greater community and bring that back into our discussion. So I'd like to see some thoughtful approach to that.
We had talked about that. Surveying is, as you know, I mean, there's a science to it, and it's not just let's throw out a bunch of questions. There's a lot, not to be that I'm against that. We certainly can do that, and we'll revisit that. Dominic it's just pulling that back out. But one of the things that my observation is, I have found that the best data is what you hear, each of you, each of our staff, who's standing at the microphone, who's emailing us. That is more authentic data than a survey form. And the people that do the surveys tend to come from a very narrow demographic. And so, yes, it's good data for that demographic. But the beauty of our community is we're small enough that it can be personalized. Now, I will grant you, it's less sort of statistically, what's the word, document, or you know what I mean, like error of margin, all that kind of stuff. I get that. But I think if you're looking for the pulse of the community, you walking your dog and talking to that neighbor and calling us and keeping us, I think there's a lot more value that's undersold in what you're hearing, who's calling you, who you're bumping into at the sports games. We're small enough that we actually can aggregate that data, whereas the big cities, forget it. And so surveys are the only way they kind of get it in bigger cities. Now, I think it's fine to do both. I'm certainly not suggesting otherwise. But I don't want you to feel like you or the city has not been listening, because you listen all the time.
Yeah, that's definitely not how I feel. I just think that it's one more important data point in addition to that. And it's kind of midway between what Heart and Soul was doing. Right? And that was a very collaborative, iterative, kind of tough. You know, it was unwielding from my perspective as a participant. There was really great value. But I think it was really hard to distill those conversations into something actionable. And so having that kind of conversational, all of us bringing things to the table, and some data, I think somewhere in there that those two things provide some value as we look at the next 10 years.
Gotcha.
Ready?
Yeah, the two of you made some really wonderful observations coming from two newer people. I want to say that one of the reasons why I ran for council back in 2007 was because there was this common vision that had come out of the bicentennial plan, but then sort of made its way into some actionable items. And it was very exciting to be caught up in that. When we, in that strategic planning session in 2010 or so, maybe there wasn't a lot of interaction. I don't remember that, but I remember, to me, it was really, really important to identify what kind of city we wanted 10 years, 20 years, you know, from then, you know, based on the other plans, but it was more of a council thing. How do we bring this into being? And I think that the administration has done a wonderful job in using the roadmap, but I do really think that it's a big part of what council's job is for policy to look out into the future, beyond 2006 to 2008. These are things that we've thought of, and it's wonderful. I'm circling things. These are things that we've talked about that maybe the new folks don't know very much about. So that would be good to revisit that. But then to say, you know, where do we where do we see our community going? What do we want into the future, like 10, 20, 2030, 2040, maybe even 2050, It doesn't necessarily have to be that huge community engagement, although I think that was a wonderful, wonderful thing, and I did participate in the bicentennial plan. It touched so many people. So I think it needs a little bit of an update, maybe a tweaking, but what I'm saying is, I think we're looking at next year when we will have a lot of new people on council. And I'm counting the 3 new people that came on this year, that you didn't really necessarily have these actions. You don't really understand where they came from. I think it would be a really good idea to have some kind of a planning session for council, maybe institute it.
When?
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments, just an alternate perspective. So we're still here. Body's not cold yet. So we would.
We buried already.
But so I just want to point out that just like moments ago, we were saying how difficult it was going to be to get 15 people to care enough about the charter review to attend 8 meetings. So I think that we've done a lot of surveys. I've seen a lot of surveys. I have yet to see a statistically significant survey come out of anything that any government body has ever done anywhere ever. What you generally get, in my opinion, are some vague criticisms that are unactionable and based on misinformation, and then once explained, the residents are like, oh, okay. I mean, even some of the most upset residents sometimes are inaccurate, and then those voices get an outsized representation in surveys. So it doesn't end up being a data point that's useful. It ends up being actually sometimes misleading and kind of sends organizations down the wrong path. And I don't want to see that happen to Kent City Council with the strategic planning session, especially if it's something that we invest a lot of time and money into. That would be a disaster. So I think just based on the size of our city and our population, our job, this is my opinion, as council members, is, to Dave's point, go out, talk to people. What are we hearing? Are we hearing, different issues that need addressed, kind of larger, broader issues? Because this strikes me as a very actionable strategic plan that is updated, it's active, it's current, it's reactive when needed to be. It's got future planning. We have, capital improvement plans involving money. We've got a whole number of things that are represented here that I think are kind of right here in front of us right now. So I think that the conversations that we have with residents can do all of what we're talking about and what we're interested in hearing. Most residents, it's been my experience, would like to see city and council do the forward thinking, and they are happy to weigh in when they see that there's something that's an issue. But the strategic planning, I think, really starts with city staff and council. So if there is strategic planning conversations, it should probably be within a council meeting setting rather than a survey, just because I don't think we're going to get results that'll be as useful as you would think. It's hard to get people to reply anymore. People aren't interested in participating as much as they might have been in '05 or '06. So just my 2 cents.
Chris?
Yeah, just to ask a question, because I really hear you, Gwen. Is for council to participate in a planning session, I understand we have to stay within kind of the 2 meetings a month structure. Is there a third way? Because I find, for example, our organization does a couple of retreats every year where you get to sort of just put on a short sleeve shirt and, you get to kind of openly. Sometimes I feel like in these settings we have to be very official and we have to be heavily researched everything, and there's not a lot of room for mistakes or just conversations that might take 2, 3, 4 hours to get through. I understand the city staff is doing a lot of that. But I wonder if there's, as part of the process that Gwen is proposing, are we able to do any of that?
Yeah, and we have done work sessions. We call it a work session. I think before I got here, there were retreats. I swear Wayne Wilson told me.
We had retreats.
University Inn at the top floor or something, or, I don't
Yep.
know.
Nope, we had them.
My observation, I have participated in hundreds of those. The best ones are short and have masterful facilitators, because otherwise they just rattle and rattle. And like you just said, it can be 4 or 5 hours and you just go, we didn't agree on, or we didn't do anything. So it's a real challenge. And I tried the first couple years to do the strategic planning as a facilitator, but that's actually awkward as the CEO. It's kind of a weird thing for me to say, Chris, you've said enough. We kind of heard you. Let's go to, no, I can't do that. So Chris keeps talking, and I'm just using you. I'm not saying. And that's what we brought in. We paid a facilitator. And so, yeah, I appreciate this conversation because it gives us some stuff to think about, like how we can structure something. I do think we could do a work session, even if it's in a room like this or in one of our new rooms at City Hall, that it's still open to the public and so forth. But we would just try to keep it maybe narrowly focused somehow. I don't know. We'd have to think about it, not just tell me everything you're thinking, right? I don't know.
Roger?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. I've been through so many strategic planning processes within the school setting, and it's interesting because everyone gets into the process, and we talk about a lot of esoteric things. We tend to talk about a lot of theoretical, boy, if we had all the money in the world, this is what we want to do, those type of things. And then we come out and we try to create some action plans to try to get at some of those things. And then, unfortunately, what happens within the structure of the real world of running the school and some of the machinations that come down from the state legislature, some of the edicts that get handed to you, you kind of get off track a little bit. I would like, from my perspective, this is just my perspective, I think we have a strategic plan. I think it's pretty clear. It's this thing. We know we have a track record from our community of those issues that, big broad issues that really community believes in and community supports. And this is just, again, my opinion. I think there's some value to having a work session on creating some specific actions that, and that can be done in an hour or two. We look at some things. We all bring issues to the table here that we see that are out there that may be getting in the way of us getting to that point where we are a walkable community. Let's use that as an example. Or there might be an issue that is getting in the way of development, economic development, that there's something that we haven't done. So we could create a list of priorities and create an action plan for each priority. And then we turn it over to administration and say, okay, what can we do to support your work in coming back to us? And Chris, I will only say that because some of us kind of eschew rules and everything, it's a lot more open conversation now than in 2011 when I first came here, because as you recall, I kept getting slapped down because I didn't realize that we could suspend the rules right off the get-go if we wanted to and actually have real conversation. Because I think the general public, those that come and those who watch on TV, they would rather see us engaged in real conversation than just going through a list of ordinances and passing them, because they have no clue sometimes as to what we've talked about. So the only way to do that is we suspend the rules and we say we're going to have open conversation. Now, some people would suggest that that's, and I suppose they're the ones who believe that they're politicians. I just don't believe in that. I think that we're problem solvers. I think we're engaged problem solvers. We're engaged with our community where problems are brought to us. And we have to talk amongst ourselves as to how can we best do it, because I don't know the best way to do it. Gwen may know something that I don't know. And Robin, yeah, for sure. If you follow where I'm headed with that, Chris, that I think that there's some value, but I think we have a strategic plan. I think it's pretty much in place. We know what the basic things are, but I think there is some value of coming out and saying, okay, based on everything that we see, what were maybe some actionable plans? And I agree with Heidi that I think we should have like a 2-year, what do we want to get accomplished in 2 years? Or what do we want to attempt to get accomplished? Not knowing the vagrancies of our state legislature, our national legislature, the issues that may be coming. I think there's some value to that, Chris. I would agree. I don't know that you need to have a retreat. I would prefer not to. I prefer to have it open to the public. Come in and listen to us have these conversations. They elect us to actually be serious about talking about these issues and engage with one another in these issues in a public forum. That's what they elect us to do. I mean, it's hard sometimes because, I mean, right now there's someone out there saying, look at that Sidoti, he's an idiot. Look what he's saying. Yeah, that's just part of it, you know. I think you accept that we have opinions, we have thoughts, we have thoughtful conversation, and we engage. I just think, I think we're in pretty good shape right now in that department, and there could be ways of expanding it a bit. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay, I think we're moving on. You know, it's a good document. Thank you, Mr. Roller, for doing this year after year. You know, the older members and the newer members don't go home and put it in a desk drawer and not read it.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of good information in there. So, like I said, it's where we came from, where we are, and where we're going. So, all right, that's it for Committee of the Whole, Community Development Committee. Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes. Alrighty, first up, we have the 2025 CDBG Action Plan. Bridget.
Yes, and actually, to piggyback a little bit on the conversation we just had, this is also the start of a 5-year plan for the period 2025 through 2029. So while Dave does have the strategic plan, it should be highlighted that much of the activities that staff does is focused on smaller plans that direct certain funding and projects that we have. Jim with the capital plan, the consolidated plan for the CDBG funding, and all of those feed right back into the larger plan that Dave was talking about. But anyway, so this is the start of our 5-year plan. Back in about 3 consolidated plans ago, we did a substantive change to the objectives in our plan, and those objectives, I'm going to have Kaylin here to speak to them. They've actually worked well, and they have done more with our CDBG funding in the last 5 plans, so 15 total years, than I think we were doing in terms of bricks and mortar projects prior to that. So as part of that, we need to talk about those objectives tonight, and we're going to talk about the projects. This is just a presentation. The CDBG process does require a 30-day comment period and another public hearing, so tonight will just be dialogue. I'm also going to take the opportunity to introduce Kaylin Cyrus. So Kaylin has been working as our development planner, and then with the retirement of Kathy Pesco and evaluating the staff and workflow in the department, the position was combined into what's called now the Zoning and Grants Coordinator position, and Kaylin took that position over the start of January. So Kaylin is going to come up and talk on that for you.
Hi. So as Bridget stated, we're working on our program year action plan this year, and then also our 5-year consolidated plan. So for the past 5 years, and then 10 years before that, our funding objectives have remained the same, and we recommend that they remain the same. They're targeted infrastructure improvements in low to moderate income residential areas, such as our Walnut Street reconstruction project, Elm Street reconstruction, like that. Offer housing programs to provide safe and decent housing for low to moderate income households. So, the city of Kent, 61.6% of households are classified as low to moderate income, and so we work closely with nonprofits such as Community Action Council, Habitat for Humanity for infrastructure improvements, furniture replacement, things like that. And then provide appropriate supportive housing services for low to moderate income persons. So we work with nonprofits such as Access Family Services now, Reconstruction Phase 2. So this is a multi-year project, I believe happening in 3 phases, and construction is scheduled for 2027. Street work improvements, concrete curb, gutter, catch basins, storm sewers, things like that. The funding recommended is $170,000. Next is the City of Kent Police Department. They do neighborhood policing in our low to moderate income areas, and education and outreach in those areas. The recommended funding for that is $10,000. Next is Access Family Services for their homeless shelter services at the Miller Community House. So they do, it's 24-hour stays. The funding helps with those costs, and the recommended funding is $15,000. Next is another one from Access Family Services, a full roof replacement at 161 and 163 Curry Hall Parkway. It is a 2-family dwelling that provides transitional housing to individuals and families within the City of Kent that experience housing insecurity. The recommended funding for that is $17,995. Community Action Council of Portage County does a furnace inspection and targeted replacement program. So they replace hot water tanks, furnaces, do inspections, replace CO2 meters and fire extinguishers. The recommended funding for that this year is $44,100. The administration, we do have costs for that, such as our ads. Sometimes it covers staff costs or training, things like that. So the recommended funding for that this year is $3,000. And then finally, we always have a contract with Fair Housing Contact Services, and the recommended funding for that is $19,000, and they do education and outreach for landlords, tenants. They make sure that fair housing practices are being followed by apartment complexes and landlords, things like that. We did receive requested funding from Home and Health Services this year for a parking lot repair at the Walter Kaplan Apartments, but they are not located within the City of Kent, so they do not fall within the deficit funding.
Thank you very much, and welcome.
I have a question.
So we've got questions from council. Yes, Roger?
Yeah, I'm just curious, I'm not sure which one could answer this, but the definition of low to moderate income, what's that range now in terms of?
It's based at 80% of the area median income, and that area median income is established basically through the census.
Right.
And they look at the metropolitan statistical areas, and for us, we are actually based on the Akron MSA. So
Okay.
that, I know that you can get income numbers that are different for Portage County,
Right.
but for the HUD programs, it is based on the AMI for the area of Summit.
And so the range would be from low to moderate would be 80% of whatever the median income is, so.
The actual range is extremely low income is considered 0 to 30% of the area median
Okay.
income. Low income is considered 31 to 50% of the area median income,
Okay.
and moderate in income is 51 to 80%. Anything over 80% would not be eligible for any programs funded with CDBG funding.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Yes, Robin?
Yeah. Did you say Elm Street,
Correct, yes.
West Elm, is scheduled, is it
From
West Elm?
Dodge Street to South Water Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be the area, yes, that would be part of the reconstruction.
And you're scheduled in '27.
Yeah, correct.
Wow,
yes.
okay.
Multiple years of funding, so last year was the first allocation to it, this is the second, and then next year there will be additional funding.
Oh, I thought that
Like
was.
we've done other areas in the south
Right.
end, this is following that. So Jim Bowling actually looks and determines which section in the south end that we're moving, and this was the next street selection.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Heidi, did you have a question?
I do. Yeah, I'm more, whoops.
I'm more interested in the consolidated plan, because I know that I love consolidated plans, just so, you know, and I actually did help the city of Steubenville with their consolidated plan, because it was, they asked a lot of the CDBG recipients to participate in at least some of the early planning, what was important, what seemed to be, you know, at least for social services and things like that. So are you still kind of involved in this process, and is council going to see it? Is there anybody?
Consolidated plan is the current, what's advertised, basically promoted now. Those objectives are the objectives for the consolidated plan. The rest of the consolidated plan document includes basically exactly what HUD tells you to do. If you've seen the document itself, it actually has the CFR sections that we speak to. We update that information. It includes information that comes from PMHA and from the nonprofit organizations. Where the city is part of the Housing Services Network, and the city's representative on that. We are the second lowest entitlement in the state. So the way it works for anyone that is not familiar, we are a direct entitlement. That means we get our money straight from the federal government, from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The rest of smaller communities our size get it through what's called the balance of states. The funding goes to the state of Ohio, and the state of Ohio actually does the larger consolidated plan, and then each of those smaller balance of states communities does a mini version of that feeds into the larger one. Ours is a standalone because we are the largest city in our county, and our county population is at a number that we are allowed to be considered entitlement. But we only receive between 250 to 300,000, which doesn't allow for a lot. With regards to the public service, there is a cap. If you're familiar, if you've worked with the consolidated plan, only 15% of an allocation is allowed to be gone to service activities.
Correct.
It has to primarily be bricks and mortar. So with our low allocation, as well as those restrictions on what can go into public service, we maximize what we can do with the little bit of funds we receive. And the objectives, like for example, my own Sonoma County, doing an infrastructure improvement in a low-income area was a one-time, we could do it in a year, right? We could give them a bucket of money and tell, you know, the community to go ahead and do it. Here, we have to cobble together 3 years' worth, and Jim is still offsetting that money with capital budget dollars. So we just do not have the resources. The objectives that we shifted to 3 consolidated plans ago, those actually are broad enough to allow us to do those infrastructure improvements, allow us to target, as you know, you've heard me say this, Mike, and say it 1,000,000 times. The downtown is great, but where people live is the most important. Safe and decent housing, to me, is one of the critical objectives that anyone that receives CDBG dollars should be committed to. And we do that through this program as well as through our CHIP funding. And then, of course, we still have the carve-out for assistance through public service for low and moderate income through services to Miller.
Further questions? All right, thank you very much. Welcome aboard.
Yeah.
Excellent job. All right, up next we have Eric is coming up to give us an economic development update.
Thank you. Let me get the monitors on real quick. Okay, I couldn't tell if this was on. There we go. Okay, thank you, Council, for allowing me the time tonight to give this update. So this is going to be an overview of 2024. We're going to touch on completion and updates of last year's projects, new dining options, shopping options, service and entertainment providers, projects that we have on the horizon, other business news and economic measures. First project completed last year that we'll talk about is just the Davy Tree corporate building renovation. That's where they added that third wing. We had Evelyn Dickerson Hair Design. Their building that they had been in for years on South Water Street was sold. They relocated to the space formerly occupied by Handcrafted on Erie Street in Acorn Alley. 101 Bottles had a renovation. They got rid of their retail beer sales, expanded the bar, added shuffleboard courts. Beware the Leopard. This is the new bar that opened up in the former Franklin Hotel space, right underneath the BW3s at the corner of Main and DePeyster. They just had their grand opening over the weekend. Some of our new dining options, we have the Blind Squirrel Pub, and this is the former Little City Grill. Leangelo's, they sublease space from Madcap Brewery, 1422 Mogador Road. They're very heavily engaged with the community. They do a lot of boosters for the school systems, not schools even in Kent, outside of Kent. Talmadge, Stowe, and I know they donate a lot of food, so really good partner of the community. Alley Mac, they took the space that Pita Pit had occupied in Acorn Alley. We have the A&J Ramen Spot. This is right across the street at the corner of Haymaker and DePeyster. It was formerly Kenco's, and the owners of this are related to the owners of the former Kenco's. We have Federales. They went in Acorn Alley. Tex-Mex, margaritas, build your own burrito bowls, things of that nature. Some of our new shopping options. This is the Kent Apparel Co. They are linked up with Kent Sportswear, and they offer a lot of very unique Kent brand and nostalgic kind of tees and clothing and other Kent items. We have Midnight Fairy Jewelry, and that was in the former G&V art space in Acorn Alley. Exelti, this is a plus-size thrift store that went in the former Sensations tanning space that's located at the corner, the southwest corner of School Street and Water Street in that multi-unit building. Here's the former Everlyn Dickerson. The new owner converted this into a different spa, or salon and spa, 4th gen salon and spa. This is a really cool one. This is Merg's Slot Car Raceway. This is in the former Michelle's on West Main Street. I had the opportunity to go here with the mayor. He's like, yeah, I haven't raced slot cars in a while, and he smoked me.
You're not that old. You're not that old yet, Eric.
So if he tries to take you there for a race, just beware, because Board and Bevy. This is the corner of DePeyster and Summit. Board games. This is the one that you authorized the expansion of the Dora to. Some of our closures last year included Brico, Moonbase Bar, the physical location for Tropis, Rocco's Cupcake Cafe, and G&V Art and Design. And I'll just highlight a couple of these. So the Moonbase Bar property is on Curry Hall Parkway. There's a group that owns a property adjacent to that I've been told closed on purchasing the property Moonbase Bar was in this week. Tropis is now Kent Apparel Co., and G&V Art and Design is Rocco's Cupcake. And there still is a lot of interest from a group that's local to Northeast Ohio in the Brico space. So hopefully that will continue to move forward. It seems like it is. Some of the projects we have on the horizon are Bibby Bop. This is going to go in the former Chipotle space on Main Street. Rascal House, they demoed the old Arby's out on Main Street. They're going to do a new construction there. Thunderstruck Donuts, they came in, picked up some plans this week. They will be in the plaza on the west side of North Manaway, if you're in the area of like Steniff and Carthage. There's a multi-tenant building over there. They have the High Tea Conspiracy Tattoo. They're going to be in there. Madalena's, I know we're really anticipating this one opening up. This is the Italian restaurant concept. It's going to have the walk-up gelato window in the city-owned building that you authorized the sale of. Main Street Memorabilia. This is owned by Tom Simpson, who owns Kent Stage. He had leased space to Defiance Tattoo. They moved down the block. This is his concept that's going to take over that space. He does have an e-commerce store that is live already. We have the Claiborne Lincoln dealership. That project has started. They did receive the CRA2 approval from council. That's going to have a creation of 4 new jobs, retention of 6 jobs. Really exciting project. The Enterprise Rent-A-Car is going to relocate from its current location on the south side of West Main Street across the street to the north side in the former Longitanos. And we had a couple of businesses that rebranded. The first one we'll talk about is Rolling Scones. Rolling Scones is located in University Plaza. They had previously been Mockingbird Bakery. That had 2 owners. One of the owners stepped down. A new one came in. They rebranded as Rolling Scones. Second is Game Day Coffee. That was formerly State Champs Coffee at the corner of Summit and Franklin. And again, they sold the business, remained a coffee shop. Helix Co., this is another exciting one. They relocated from North Canton. They're a company that provides, they created a proprietary software for businesses to use that kind of helps them engage with insurance providers and contractors when there's an emergency or some kind of disaster at their facility. So think of a tornado coming through and taking the roof off of Best Buy, for example. They could use this platform to kind of streamline everything, communications all in one place. They've indicated they're looking to grow. They want to do that here in Kent. They want to utilize the hotel for hosting conferences to teach new users of their software how to do that. Really, really glad to have them. Some of the other business news we have, the Jobs Ohio Small Business Grant. So this had been formerly known as the Inclusion Grant. This is a product from Jobs Ohio that we kind of administered through our regional partner, Team Neo. And we had 4 Kent businesses receive funding from this last year: Beamer Machine, Polymerics, Escott & Co., and Emerald Environmental. And this funding will help with expansion and lead to the cumulative creation of 13 new jobs across the 4 companies. The way it works is they give you the grant. You have 3 years to increase your full-time employment equivalency by 10%. ACS, I know these photos are kind of small, but the building that you're looking at on the right, that photo, is 1347 Middlebury. It's between Superior and Ariel and Shelley, behind Tompkins Landing. I know some of you had received complaints in the last couple of years about the giant tire mountain that had formed behind that. Well, based on that experience and the experience with a tenant after that, the owner of that property said, you know what, maybe the commercial real estate game isn't for me. We were able to get him in contact with ACS, who was looking for space for expansion. They were able to work out a deal. ACS received a revitalization grant through Team Neo, through Jobs Ohio. The amount wasn't disclosed. They don't have to share that with us. And basically what the revitalization grant goes to is making a space a clean, dry, well-lit box. And again, there's a job creation component that goes along with this. Over the next, I'm not sure what their time frame is, but they committed to creating 20 new jobs. And on the right, that's some of the improvements that they've done already. As you can see, it's, you know, siding. They put up a fence for security. They cleaned the site up. They did a new roof. And that is like their trademark color of their buckets, Strickland gray. You can see the tax revenue by year on the next slide is trending in the right direction, upward.
Can I ask about that?
Heidi, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. So ACS,
Yeah.
are they moving to this
They-
building? And so they're existing, or the building that they had?
So here's what happened, Heidi. ACS's current facility is on Mogador Road.
Correct.
And they like to build product, so they make like the buckets for heavy equipment and, you know, going in the slag and whatnot. They like to have equipment ready to order, but they were out of space to store it. And this was a great alternative, and it's maybe a mile away. So that's how they chose this. They're not closing their facility. This is an expansion.
I see, okay.
Sorry about that. Got ahead of myself a little bit. All right, that'll work. So we move along to, there's the KSU income tax by year restated. Just, again, trending upward a little bit. Income tax is a percentage of the total income, and it's just kind of on par with that increase you saw on the last slide. unemployment rate by month. See, we're on par with the rest of the state, with the county. I can't explain the spike in June. This is another interesting one. I know that labor and workforce has been a huge concern for a lot of employers. You'll see this is continuing to trend towards pre-pandemic levels. Here's some of the conclusions. Challenges with the labor force have improved since the past year, but they still present challenges for some employers. The Jobs Ohio Small Business Grant continues to be a successful program for qualified businesses. Continued investments in the city bodes well. And we do have to deal with, the changes that are being made by the current presidential administration. They do influence the decision-making of the companies. They're going to have an impact on supply chains. The tariffs are a great example, It's almost like you can't plan for it.
Yeah.
Because one day they're going to come along, the next day, well, what, just kidding. And it's hard. It's hard to plan for something like that, for the unknown.
Absolutely.
I also want to bring up that we did have 2 issues with 2 of our revolving loan fund loan recipients. One of them did default on a loan. They had an outstanding balance of $24,484.34. The original loan amount on that was $30,941.30. The revolving loan review committee decided not to pursue the collections on the collateral, since it was a minimal amount of used restaurant equipment, to which it would probably cost more than what that equipment would even be worth. We also had another issue with one of our loan recipients. They fell into arrears, but they have since brought their loan current. Another thing I want to just point out is about 1.5 years ago, Heather Malarchik brought to our attention that, we've got this organization, the DKCVB, the Destination Convention Visitors Bureau. It's not really doing anything, and we should probably do something with it. So we were tasked with doing something with it, and that's what we've been doing for the last year and a half. So we've got some new members on the board, and the purpose of that is to get heads and beds, because it's funded by hotel bed tax, and have those people spend their money downtown. So I'm going to have more updates that I'd love to share with the council probably in August or September. That concludes my presentation, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Eric. Are there questions from council? Yes, Jerry.
Have you heard anything about the Kent Drug Mart on East Main moving to Brimfield?
I have heard that. I've been in contact with the real estate agent, and we've actually even sent some potential clients his way. He doesn't want that listed yet, but I've heard that's going to happen.
Okay.
It was confirmed at the JED meeting. That drug mart is relocating in front of Brookfield High School.
Okay, I got it.
Do you want to mention, I know there's no plans at the moment for what happens to it, but there's a new owner of the Huntington Bank.
Yeah, he wants to explore seeing what's behind those green panels. I know that he's going to revisit that when the weather permits. He's kind of stated that I can wait to find the right tenant that works for us in the city, because I have that existing lease from Huntington in place. So from my conversations with him, ideally he'd like to get another financial tenant because it's set up for that.
Are there other? Yes, Roger.
Would you clarify for a minute? He's leasing the building, or does he own the building?
No, when he purchased that building, there was a lease in place with Huntington. They still had time remaining on their lease.
Okay, so Huntington is paying him then?
Correct.
I got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other questions from council? I'm just going to go ahead and break protocol real quick and ask about if there's any updates on the Hasawi building. Hasawi, I'm not sure if I said that right or not. Thank you.
You got lights on in there.
Yeah, they do have lights.
We actually, the building department, we just sent as we do on a regular basis, a list of where we at with the plan review. He's self-managing the project. The developer is acting as his own general counsel. He's got about 7 or 8 items that we're supposed to be responding back to. The assistant law director and I have been in discussions with the attorney representing them, and they understand that there's pressure from us to do that. We're on them all the time. My hope is that we actually have something, we have a certificate of occupancy in that within the next year. There's an issue right now with the hood. So it's gone through several iterations, but right now the exhaust for the restaurant and bakery uses on the first and second floor, they actually didn't fully design it to come outside. Minor issues. And the alternative was asked of me, would I let them vent it out right over College, Franklin, in the alley, and the response at the second, like, very low. I said, no. You need to figure out how to get that to go out the roof. So they're working on that. There is a channel that it would require a bit of basically they'll have to like a little carve out to get it to go straight up and stuff. It is literally a challenge because regardless of the experience and expertise in the building department, the community development department, our technical plan reviewer, we are not correct. And we are usually, there's just a lot of excuses, so we try.
You're not correct per the building owner.
Correct.
You are correct per
Everybody
city.
else.
Yes, thank you. Just
So
want
my building
to make
code,
sure that's clear.
The Kent Codified Ordinance is yes.
Yes.
You're correct and all that, yeah.
Got it.
It's a challenge. It's been a challenge. We push, I copy city manager on it. It's a constant push.
We're doing everything that we can do on our end as a
Yes.
city to get this moving.
Yes.
Got it.
I mean, we've identified it already as a nuisance property. We've cited him. They're de minimis fines, but it is a challenge. It is something that we want off our plates. It's 7 years. 7 years this has been. And we recognized in the beginning there was issues with their design team. That Summers, that whole project had some challenges, but there's been a design team in place since then, and yet it's not there at all. So still goes back to the original. So there's just a lot. We send bullet points. I wish I would just get back yes, no, submitting it this date. We get.
And on a little bit related, the mill property, has there been any progress there?
No.
When's he going to start on that?
There's no activity going to happen on that until he completes the salaries. And anecdotally, I do not know this as anything formalized, but I do know that there was, I think there were some, they were looking at some insurance issues. I will say whenever we monitor it, our code enforcement officers monitor it, and we receive any information from anybody over there about an open door, open window, anything. Eric actually spotted an open door on there. We immediately notify them, and they do button it up. They do have quite a bit of debris in the side yard. They basically that south side that we're going to make sure that they clean up this year, because I've noticed that there's been a lot of transient individuals that rummage through those, and it's not safe. It's just not safe. So it's cordoned off. Public can't get to it, but people that illegally trespass are getting in there, and it's not safe. And I do think it's in a situation where it could harbor vermin, so we're going to take care of that.
Okay, got it.
But yeah, they're not going to do anything. Salary seems to be the only thing that we can get a focus on right now.
Sounds good. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for community development. There's no business under finance. Health and Public Safety, Mr. Amrine.
Yes, Health Department Service Update, Joe?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you this evening. I brought Teresa with me as well. I also want to thank you for all the kind comments on our annual 2024 annual report. I was very appreciative of those comments. And so we are excited about a couple things that are housed inside that report. One is the community outreach that's been happening. I think over the years, the Kent City Health Department is now looked at as a strong partner. Instead of us calling people and saying, hey, can we get into your event, people are calling us to say, hey, will you come to our event, or how can we help you, how can we partner with you? So in the next year, we look to continue to forge those strong bonds with agencies and organizations, and especially with Kent State University. And the pop-up food pantry, I think, is an excellent example of that. We're also excited, I have to do a little plug for our 3rd annual Historic South Bend Health Fair that will happen on June 21st this year. Of course, that's open and free to all of Kent residents, so we hope everybody will come. And we're very grateful for the generosity of Kent Parks and Recreation, who allows us to use their Franklin Avenue building free of charge for that, so that helps with our budget costs. But we are very, really very eager to share updates with the tobacco retail licensing program. When we instituted that, we promised that we would come back and give you an update. You may have heard on the radio this week or through newspapers reports that Ohio has scored an F in terms of cessation and education programs. That's very disheartening to hear, but I want to clarify that our state grant does not cover cessation. We are not allowed to provide those services under the grant using any of those funds. But it does cover the TRL, where we are on the leading edge in the state, and Jaleesa is going to actually provide an update for you on that now.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thanks so much for having me. If you look in the green folders that are on your tables, I provided a little bit of some handouts just so that you can follow along. So the first handout is front and back. It's basically a timeline of the program, of the tobacco retail licensing program, and how we will do compliance checks. Ideally, this is how we would do them, working with Kent Police Department, of course, and really just getting out there and making sure that our retailers are compliant. But just to give you a visual of how the program kind of runs and when we kind of get things ready and when we send things out to retailers. The second handout is the more important one. It provides you like a little update of what's going on with the program, a little snapshot, if you will. So I just wanted to highlight a few things on there. So number one, our number of retailers, tobacco retailers specifically, has steadily decreased from 30 to 23. So as of this year, there are 23 retailers. So we're almost down to our limit that we set in our proximity ordinance. So I'm really happy about that. And it seems like we might be losing another one in Drug Mart, so I'll keep my ears open for that. The next chart over on the right-hand side kind of explains the education that goes into tobacco retail licensing. And so basically it just shows that in 2025, when retailers spent 20 minutes, which is not a big whole lot of chunk of time, they end up scoring a good amount higher on their retail test. So basically this test just helps them understand like what are we expecting of them as a city and as licensed retailers, and what they can do to kind of prevent themselves from failing compliance checks. That's the most important part, making sure that they have the things that they need and the training for their clerks, making sure that they understand the rules behind the licensing program. Down below, almost forgot. There's a little bit of information about our feedback from our retailers. So we do have a tobacco retail licensing feedback form that we send out pretty periodically. The QR code stays the same, so, and the link stays the same as well, so they can always get to it. But we've got some good feedback. Thanks for the quiz. Good as always. They did address a problem with our YouTube, which was addressed. So now we're good with that. Those have been the only two so far, but good reviews so far. Next, below that, you can find the available funds. As you can see, it is going up per year and showing that our program can be self-sufficient, and just showing us where else we can spend money for tobacco. So we're looking at some cessation, some ways that we can spend it on cessation, some different things that we can do. So we're really excited about that. And then the last little chart, in 2024, 97% of retailers said that their facility had mandatory ID training for staff, and in 2025 we had 100%. So happy for that, just a 3% increase, but that means that they're listening, they're taking what they're learning from their classes seriously, and they're trying to be compliant with us here in the city. So that's all I have.
Very good.
I'll be here to answer any questions.
Yeah, question?
Thank you so much for this work, I appreciate it. Joan, you did say that there's no tobacco cessation resources in this program.
Well, in the grant.
In this grant.
But with the money that we make with the TRLs,
Okay.
we spend that how we want.
Okay, good. And so is that one of the services that you're providing?
Yes, that is one of the services we're looking at providing right now.
Okay.
We're looking at distributing quick hits, and seeing how we can add NRG to those, so they have like fidgets in them, they have some information about, tobacco quit line information and different cessation resources, locally and at a national and state level.
Okay, thanks, appreciate it.
Further questions? Anybody from the audience?
Mike.
Oh, Mike, I'm sorry, I didn't see Mike. Go ahead.
Where do vape shops come into this?
So vape shops are considered tobacco retailers.
What about the marijuana dispensary?
That unfortunately is not under our jurisdiction, under the law,
I'm sure it
so,
is.
we're still waiting to hear more information as well.
Okay, thank you.
Further? Audience? Back to council?
Just informational.
Oh, just informational. Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, nothing under Land Use Committee, Streets and Sidewalks, Mr. Sidoti?
Yes. First thing up is we have a modification to the city's parking regulations, and Commissioner is already proposed.
I am here. So this has kind of been a hot button topic, I think, a lot, really over the past year, and it kind of has heated back up more recently. So specifically, the area of the city that has generated a lot of the complaints is the historic South End. We have an area in the historic South End where essentially throughout time, people have sort of improved the tree lawn area and use it for parking, which is in violation of the city ordinance. That being said, it has never been enforced ever in that part of the city. In response to that, and in response to some complaints, we met as the Traffic Engineering and Safety Committee and looked at different options we had that we could take to help address some of the problem. So I guess I'll speak for the committee in saying that our hope and recommendation would be that the city adopt an ordinance that would prohibit any property owner or occupant of a property from being able to park more than 3 vehicles on a roadway. Or on the, let me phrase it correctly, on the public right-of-way.
If I can, let me jump into, I'm sorry, but he didn't, I know because he's got it fresh in his brain, but you may not have all the, he's right, we haven't really enforced it because it's not really been a problem, but like many things, there was one particular address that basically became abusive to the neighbors in a way. It felt abusive to the neighbors, let's put it that way. And I know Mr. Turner got a lot of calls about it because they were parking as many as 9 personal vehicles on the street. And then when we check it out, they'd move some of them onto the front lawn, so to speak, and then Bridget would try to, we tried to chase the citation for over a year. And you know, it's like many things, the laws aren't unbeatable. If you work hard enough, you can try to get around the laws. So we finally got to the point where we were like, we got to have an upper limit. Because look, down the street is still cars parked, but it's 1 or 2 that maybe 1 to a house or 2. It's not an issue. The issue is the 9, it's the volume. And so that's where we're like, okay, since our conventional methods of ticketing and citing has not really been effective, what if we came up with this new criteria of no more than 3 on the city street right away, like he said. It feels like the street out there, but we generally don't like to change our laws for a very specific, Nick's real adamant about we got to enforce everything the same everywhere. And in that neighborhood, there actually makes some sense. There's a history to why there's some parking on the street. I mean, they're smaller lots, they're small, may not all have driveways, so we're not trying to get rid of that or stop that. What we're trying to stop is the one-off, the individual that's parking as many as 9. Or in this case, we're sort of drawing a line at 3. We feel like that's a number that is fair and reasonable and should balance the concerns of the neighbors in a way that things can get back to normal. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would just add as well, just to be clear, there is a law on the books that technically allows us to enforce tree lawn parking on the particular property in question. It becomes a bit of an ethical dilemma, right? Because if you drive down West Elm Street, there are cars parked on most tree lawns. So the ethical dilemma becomes, because this one particular property is abusing that privilege essentially, how do we now go enforce it on this person without enforcing it on the rest of the street? So the view of this is more of a way to manage the amount of cars people can put out there to allow us to consistently enforce the ordinance and not feel like it's just being enforced on a specific targeted property.
And this will only be in residential areas, the prohibition. But
Questions? Yeah, hi.
Are we talking about per address? So no more than 3 vehicles per address?
Yes, but I don't believe that applies to parking vehicles in a driveway or anything like that. It's that address couldn't park more than 3 vehicles in the public right-of-way.
In the public right-of-way, correct. Correct. And so that would be single-family homes or like boarding houses or?
You said single-family or boarding houses?
Or boarding houses, like if a house has?
Boarding houses, the owners aren't going to be there. They're going to have all their residents there. So that'll be an issue where
Rooming houses are allowed in R1, R2, R3. In other words, we have our non-conforming, so it would not, there aren't any in the area.
But isn't this, are you asking for a potential ordinance that would be residential areas across the city or just this area?
It would apply to what, all R1, R2, and R3, which, like Bridget said, we don't have rooming houses in those districts, at least legally.
The non-conforming use ones we still do.
Yeah, we could have a non-conforming use, although not in that specific one. Rooming houses are required to park on site.
Yep.
1.25 per room.
Who's counting?
Chris?
Thank you, Chief. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, there's already a law in the books banning parking on the tree line.
Yes.
So this new ordinance would ban more than 3 cars parking on a public right-of-way across the city. How does the enforcement look different? If enforcement is difficult on the one, why wouldn't it be more difficult on the other?
The reason the enforcement is difficult on one is we're talking about a long-standing ordinance, but a long-standing practice. I've had conversations with Mr. Turner, and I don't want to speak for you, sir, but really in the 50-some years that he's lived on the street, this has been an allowable parking solution for people there. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, does every house have a driveway? Do the driveways have enough space? It's an older neighborhood without a lot of space on the properties. So, again, just from a reasonableness standpoint, going back and enforcing something that's been on the books the entire time this has been going on but has never been enforced. We actually tried to go that route briefly last year, and the complaints on the opposite side of this question went through the roof.
So if I can just follow up, in this case, the enforcement, because it's a new ordinance, there's a bit of room in terms of resident sort of dissatisfaction or response being a bit different.
Yeah.
Also, I think the fundamental answer is most of those people aren't parking more than 3 cars.
3 cars.
It's just the one, really. So really, what he's saying is, I can treat everybody fairly because there's really only one person that's
Doing this.
technically exceeding that, at least that we know of.
Yes.
3 cars and 3
Roger?
Yeah,
Melissa?
Melissa was up first.
Thanks, Chief. I lived right around the corner from this particular situation and know that that area of the road is very narrow compared to other streets, and it doesn't have, it is part of the improvement plan, though, and how will that impact this issue? Right? Because they're gonna, into 2027, there's gonna be that complete renovation, there'll be curbs, and that'll make a huge difference.
It'll make a huge difference for sure, and I think that's a big part of the problem in this area of the city is there are no curbs.
Right.
And like I said, I mean, if you drive down the street, you'll see where, in the absence of curbs, people have essentially brought in loads of gravel and dumped a load of gravel right there on what would be considered public right-of-way or tree lawn, and it's really just turned it into a little parking lot for people over time. So having curbs installed, that makes it a little more clear, I think, to the public and allows us to say, you pulled your tires up over a curb to park here. This is a fair citation at this point. This isn't a long-standing practice anymore.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner?
Yeah. Having intimate knowledge regarding the issue, the big concern recently has been the number of vehicles that have accumulated by just a couple of people. And they're more like junk vehicles or making the street a used car lot. There's no real rational reason for 9 cars at a property which has a husband and a wife and 2 kids. Or another one which basically has 1 person at the property. He has 9 vehicles. They're parked hither and yon. Just a lot of complaints regarding especially parking on the opposite side of the street, where then the big issue becomes what is right of way and how that's applied. And I think that Hope has worked on that diligently. And so that matter, along with Bridget actually, so that, and the chief, everybody's kind of come together. I don't know if they've necessarily concluded that they have the answer, but we're working to try to address that. But I think the matter of establishing the 3 cars per property as relates to that area anyway seems reasonably appropriate, seems to address the issue. It's not saying that they can't have more than the number of vehicles, but those have to be parked then on their property in an appropriate fashion, as opposed to on-street parking. Clarifying the issue on West Elm, because I lived there for 55 years. Didn't know about all the other issues about on-street parking there. The vast majority of people in that area all have driveways. They have the ability to do the same thing other people do, but there also been a lot of parking over there. The argument about what is a tree lawn and what is an improved area, that's a whole nother issue. Because tree lawn parking, I know because I inadvertently parked on my tree lawn one time, and they came down and they ticketed me for it.
Hey,
But
Robin?
when I
Do you have any other questions for Chief? Because I think we're into a committee here now.
I apologize.
No,
I was just trying to explain exactly why we
I know.
are where we are on that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I see.
you kind of get an idea, because I think we're probably going to be voting on that.
At some point.
So I wanted people to get a perspective of what the issue is. I apologize.
Jeff?
So, I guess my two questions would be, if it sounds like there's 9 cars for one house there, all these cars have current registration?
I think all but one.
So that one could be eliminated right away. And are they leaving every 24 hours?
Unfortunately, yes.
They are all leaving?
They're at least moving. So let me explain a little bit, I
Yeah.
guess, how we can cite for 24 hours
Right.
storage. For lack of a better way to say it, and I'm almost hesitant to say this in a public meeting, but if you move your car, if you roll forward a foot,
Okay, you're
not-
technically out of the...
You're technically out of it, because,
Okay.
so first and foremost, there was a legal issue a couple years ago. If you notice, we used to carry chalk around, we used to chalk tires.
Yeah.
That is somehow, some way, a district court of appeals has declared that to be an unreasonable search or seizure
It's like
to
a
chalk
Fourth Amendment
someone's tire.
violation, I think.
Because we're touching their property.
Right.
So it's a Fourth Amendment violation. We can't do that. So now we have, in our parking tablets, they essentially take a picture of where the valve stem is at.
Hmm.
If they return to come check that vehicle in 24 hours and the valve stem's in a different location, we can no longer say that vehicle didn't leave. We can't do it. So that's the only way to track that. So as long as that vehicle rolls forward a foot,
Okay.
we can't cite it for street storage.
Okay.
You said you had another question.
That was it.
That was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from council? All right, anyone from the audience have a question? No? Back to council?
Move to approve the parking changes with emergency.
Second.
With the emergency?
With the emergency?
Yes.
No, I didn't, I'm sorry.
With emergency.
I didn't have my hearing aid in.
Any other comments?
No, I don't have any comments. I appreciate making changes. It can be very frustrating, I know, to live on a street where you feel like your rights as a homeowner or property owner are being infringed upon by people that aren't displaying the same respect. So I appreciate you bringing this to council.
Jack, do you have any other comments? Seeing no other comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. There you go, chief. All right, we have Portage Hike and Bike Trail, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources grant agreement. Mr. Boley.
Good evening. As the bridge on Summit Street over the Cuyahoga River is in need of replacement or rehabilitation, and along with that, we want to connect the bike trail that goes from Tannery Park and ends up coming into downtown and actually goes outside this building. So in 2023, with council's approval, we signed an agreement with the Portage County Engineers Office, who owns the bridge, to solve both those problems together. As part of that agreement, it was stated that we both search for funding. So ODNR's agreed to provide $196,000 towards the design of this, so we're requesting council's approval to execute that agreement.
Okay. Any questions for Jim? See any hands? Okay, anyone in the audience have a question? Back to council?
Move to approve
Second.
with emergency?
Second.
Emergency, okay. Jeff, any other comments?
No.
No? Gwen, no? Seeing no other comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Now, Jim, you're up again.
Thank
We
you.
have the Franklin Township Hudson Road Improvement Phase 5. Phase 5.
Phase 5, yes. Many of you probably remember this came last year in 2024. This is a project being led by the township and the Portage County Engineers Office. 83% of the project's in the township and 17% in the city. And the project was to widen and resurface and do repairs on Hudson Road. Unfortunately, their estimates came in higher than they could afford, so the township decided to take a step back and reassess their plan, and they decided to reduce the scope of the work to make it just a repair the street and resurface the road and not pursue the widening of the road. And then separately, we'll look into finding other monies with bike and ped monies to make a connection from Hudson-Judson Trail down to the city. So they have received OPWC money to pay for half of this. So we're seeking council's approval, like they gave last year, to enter into an agreement with Franklin Township to resurface Hudson Road.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none from council, any questions from the audience? Seeing none, back to council.
Move to approve with
Second.
emergency.
Second.
Any comments, Jack?
No.
Nope. Chris? No. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay. Mr. Bowling, one last shot here tonight.
Yes. This is another cooperative agreement, this time proposed working with the Davy Tree Company. As you know, they're doing the work on their seed campus and working with us on North Manaway Street. As part of those discussions, Davy Tree is building a public arboretum right next to the John Davy Arboretum that we own and is run by Parks and Recs Department. So Davy Tree asked if we could investigate how these two arboretums could benefit from each other. So Angela and Sam with Parks and Rec and Davy Tree, and we met and said there does seem to be some potential benefits and felt it was worth investigating. So we're requesting council's approval to execute the agreement provided where there would be a joint planning study done to see how these two facilities can function better together in the future.
Okay. Questions from council?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Would it involve, I guess it wouldn't involve an expansion of the city's portion of it. It would just be kind of a combining of Davies and what the city currently has, correct?
We don't know.
Oh?
Well, we don't know.
Okay, all right.
So here's a best example. The current arboretum doesn't have a parking lot. The only way to get there is to walk to it.
Right.
They're building an arboretum that has a parking lot. Okay? Our arboretum has a bathroom. Theirs won't. We're going to be building a walkway as part of the North Manaway Street project that's along that area. How can we do that to better connect the two? So those are just a few of the things that were discussed, but there's no set, like, we don't know the goal. But we just know there's two right next to each other, same public's being served, and there's a lot of benefit potential to work together.
Seems like a good opportunity to save some money too. Everybody wins.
Nice
Excellent.
indeed.
Yes, Heidi.
Yeah, so is this going to require like bringing in an expert to do a plan? Is that why it's costing $10,000?
Well, it would be bringing in a firm to look at more so physically how they can be connected, as well as having discussions that would be more with Parks and Rec, the Parks and Rec Board, and Davy Tree, how they can then function together programmatically wise.
Will it result in like some kind of visual?
Yes, that's what I would expect.
So kind of like a design almost.
Kind of like, yeah. We would assume, like, if let's just talk about the parking lot. If we're going to want to use the parking lot, then they have to be able to walk from the parking lot to the facility. That would require some plan showing where that would make sense. Same thing with the bathroom.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So you need a motion from?
Yes, please.
Okay. Council?
I'd like to move to approve with emergency.
Second.
Any comments?
I think this is very, very exciting. I think this is something, I've been jealous of Aurora's. They have like chronological arboretum, and I've been absolutely jealous of it ever since I heard of it, and I love the whole idea of it, with it being with Davy Tree. They've been a great partner with the high school, with the forestry program. This seems like such a great fit for the Tree City, for Kent, for Parks and Rec, for Davy. It's very exciting. Thank you for bringing it.
Anyone else? Yep. Seeing no other questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?